Danny Flexer here for Seconds Out with my old pal Tony Sims at the Matchroom Elite Gym here in Great Wally, Little Wally?
Any Wally.
Some type of Wally. What's it like at the moment, the kind of balance? It's a very busy gym at the moment. Obviously Ted Cheeseman's just coming off a defeat. Unfortunately Ricky Burns isn't here today, but what's it like at the moment? It just seems like you're adding new people quite regularly as well.
Well, we've added two youngsters, Charles Frankham, who's only 19, and John Doherty. He's just turned 21, so they're the two young ones that are just coming into the stable. So they've got a good mix of experience in here and people to look up to, as you say, like Ricky Burns, Martin, Jay Ward and John Ryder. They're obviously an experienced trio in the gym that the youngsters can look up to and train alongside.
Do you think a gym needs that every few years, an influx of really young talent to kind of freshen it up a little bit and get the older guys re-motivated again as well?
Oh, I don't think it's that. I think it's just, it's timing really, because obviously, fighters that I've had in the past, like Kevin Mitchell and Darren Barker and Lee Purdy, they've obviously had their day and moved on. So then the ones coming up behind them was obviously like John Ryder and Martin Ward, and then behind them are like, Joe Cordena and Conor Benn and Felix Cash, and then behind them, then you've got like John Doherty, Charles Frankham. So what he he skips every couple of years, and then obviously a couple retire, and then you join a new couple join on.
You mentioned John Ryder. Obviously he's fighting now. It's been announced David Lemieux on the undercard of Canelo against Jacobs. How delighted are you for Ryder, who you've managed throughout his career, you've trained for a long time now as well, that he's finally getting his moment in the sun on a real high profile card, probably the biggest show in the world this year?
Yeah, well, as you say, it's a really high profile show, and he was a tricky one really, because he's mandatory for obviously Callum Smith's WBA title, and Callum's allowed to do a voluntary at the moment, then he's allowed to do a unification, so it could be quite a while until John gets his mandatory shot. It might even be the start of next year. So I said to John, you're going to have to take a fight in the in between them. This fight was offered to us by Eddie Hearn from Golden Boy, and although John's obviously risking his #1 mandatory spot, there's an interim title on the line, which is good, but also, like you say, it's a high profile fight for John, and I think he needs that sort of high profile at the minute, to people not just in Britain but in America to know him, and that obviously goes on to bigger and better fights for John, being in a mandatory position with Callum Smith. If he does meet Callum Smith, his profile's that much bigger. Obviously the purse gets bigger, so everything around him gets bigger.
You've got a couple on the big O2 bill, of course. Conor Benn's coming back from nearly 9 months out with his right hand injury. Has he been looking in the gym? Have you seen any kind of niggles, or is it completely gone now?
No, he's sparring well with the hand now. Obviously, it was quite a bad operation, really. He had the bone part on the knuckle come right through the tendons, so he's had to have the whole tendon repaired. And but he's only young. He's only like 22, so he's got plenty of time in his career to get into good fights, and he's been sparring really well, and his hand's holding up good. So yeah, I'm pleased with his hand.
You've obviously got Joe Cordena fighting for the British title against Andy Towne. Has this come sooner or maybe later than you thought it would for Joe, the first kind of British title shot?
Well, obviously with Lewis Ritson vacating the title, I think Joe was probably next in line, being a Commonwealth champion. So that's how that's come about. But I mean, it's amazing really. He's had 8 fights as a pro, and to fight for a British title in your 9th fight, already Commonwealth champion, already WBA international champion, and he's coming up, he ain't even double figures yet. So it's an amazing feat, and Joe's a special talent, and I expect him to win the British title next Saturday.
Martin J. Ward obviously waiting on a fight date at the moment, but it's been talked about maybe Ryan Garcia next, which would be another big fight potentially in America. What do you make of that one?
Yeah, I mean, Martin's waiting for a big fight really. He's obviously had the slip up last year in the James Tennyson fight, but you know, people on the outside, and it's all right saying things after the fight, but I know what went on there, you know, with his weight and that. He didn't do his weight properly. He knows he never, and you know, he was struggling after a few rounds. I mean, he had Tennyson down in the second round, but he was struggling bad, you know, where he cut his weight too quick nearer to the time. People outside of boxing don't realise what the fighters do to make weight, you know, and he done it all wrong, you know, and sometimes you can make that slip up once and it all comes unstuck for you. Sometimes you can get away with it. But he's, like the last couple of fights, he's done his weight properly. You know, he had a good win out in Italy for the WBC international title, and you know, he wants to put himself back in the frame again. And he's just waiting on a big fight coming to him, really. You know, we've just been waiting, that's all.
What about Ricky Burns? What's kind of the next step for him? You know, he's got that big amount of wins now, which was important, you know, a stat. But where does he go from here? I know he lost to Crolla with the most recent meaningful fight, but yeah, Crolla's now fighting Lomachenko, so there's no real disgrace in that. So what's next for Ricky?
Yeah, it was a shame really that the Crolla fight didn't get the return, because we were talking about if Ricky won that fight, then Crolla has the return. If Crolla won the top fight, then Ricky had the return. But we tried to do the return, but nothing ever materialised for it. So yeah, I thought it was a pretty close fight that night, and it could have gone either way. But yeah, Ricky the same thing really. He's bounced back with a couple of wins, and he's just really waiting for a decent big fight to come up for him really. And we'll just see what comes along for him. He's in the gym training as usual, and yeah, he just wants another crack really at something. So we'll just wait and see what comes in.
You're the boss of the Matchroom Gym here, of course. You work closely with Eddie Hearn, yeah, all with Matchroom fighters as well. He's now working with DAZN in the US as well as Sky here, which means a lot more shows happening in America, kind of splitting his time. How, if any way, has that affected your role here? Like, is it harder to find dates for fighters? Is it easier to get dates, easier to get them over in America perhaps? What effect has it had?
He ain't had me in America yet, had he? No, I mean, you know, he's a busy man, and he's got a lot of dates on. He's got a lot of dates on in America and DAZN, and he's got a lot of dates over here as well. So he's obviously a busy man. And like Frank Smith took an important role on there in Matchroom, and he does a lot of the work here now as well. So it ain't as though Eddie's in America and you can't get hold of him. Frank's always here, and, you know. So between the pair of them, there's still a lot going on. You know, there's still a lot of fighters getting on shows. So everyone should get their fair share of work still.
Are you keen to go to America, or keen for your fighters to go to America? As you've said, you haven't been there with any of the fighters yet since the DAZN deal, but are you keen to make that happen?
It don't matter to me really. It doesn't matter as long as the fight's right, you know, and the money's right, and then fighters will fight anywhere really. So it don't matter where we go for a fight, you know, just depending on what the fight is.
What do you see as the future of the gym and your role as well? Will it just carry on as it has for the past however many years? If it ain't broke, obviously don't fix it. Or are there more things you want to achieve, or do you want to expand or anything like that?
No, I'll just take it day by day, week by week really, and just, you know, with boxing, you don't know whether the career of a fighter is going to be short or long really. You don't know. You know, probably Ricky Burns never thought turning professional at 18 that he was still going to be fighting at like 36. You know, he's talking about fighting at 40 still, so you don't know. You know, some fighters can turn pro, have 2 or 3 years, and then sometimes their careers get cut short, so you don't really know. You've got to take boxing day by day and week by week, really.
And talking about the link with Matchroom, something we talked about before, does it usually happen that you'll take a fighter on and be working with them for some time, you might recommend them to Matchroom in terms of a promotional deal or whatever, or does it ever happen the other way around, that they'll have someone that they promote and they'll say, Tony, do you fancy taking this kid?
It's mostly that the fighters will come to me, and then we take them to Matchroom. That's how it mostly happens. I think with fighters turning professional, they'll keep an eye on who's doing what, you know, in a pro game, and they might ring around and trying to get a connection with the trainer. Or sometimes the amateurs already train in the gym alongside the professionals. A lot of time that happens now. You know, so yeah, they'll come through like that. Or where my son Charlie manages all the fighters now, they might come through to Charlie and then on to me. Do you know what I mean, like that? But 9 times out of 10, it will go from us into Matchroom, not the other way around.
There's kind of 2 sides to that. So they could see you and think, it's a great reason to come to the gym. I could end up getting signed by Matchroom, which is obviously an advantage because you get the pick of the talent to an extent. But then there's the flip side that, do you ever worry that some of them are using you to get to Matchroom? And maybe they're not great fighters either. That's the other problem.
Maybe, yeah. But then if they're not good fighters, then you don't take them on. So, you know, I have to be a little bit choosy what to take on anyway, because you can only train so many fighters in a day. I've got a good assistant with me now, Donnell Smith, who helps me out a lot. And yeah, you just have to watch who you take on and bring into the gym, because you need to think, before you sign a fighter, you need to think, you know, what makeup he's got, whether he's been a decent amateur, whether he can go on to be a decent pro. So, you know, and in the first year of training a fighter, you sort of get to know his personality, what he's about, how he trains. So all that goes into whether you think you're going to have a long-term relationship with him or not.